Hey everybody, and welcome to the Legendarium Green Team, where we cover the books that we love and the main teams can't keep up with. I'm going to be your host today, Cesky, and I'm joined by three uniquely qualified individuals to talk about the Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. Panda, who's reading an incredibly tough series, one of the toughest, straight through, no breaks, every day, all day.
No. Hello.
Yes, hello. Kyptan, who prefers the hardest of hard sci-fi.
Woo! Hi.
And Jeff Dugan, who has read this book more than anybody else participating and is likely to break into song at any moment.
You have been warned.
This is also Jeff's first time participating with us here on the Green Team, so warm welcome to him.
Welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
The Phantom Tollbooth, of course, is a beloved children's book written by Norton Juster. Yes, all right, I'll give a synopsis. The Phantom Tollbooth follows the story of a young boy named Milo who is bored and unexpectedly receives a magic toll booth that transports him to the once prosperous but now troubled Kingdom of Wisdom. Along with a dog named Talk and the Humbug, Milo goes on a quest to the Castle in the Air, seeking the kingdom's two exiled princesses, named Rhyme and Reason. As Milo learns valuable lessons, he finds the love of learning in a story full of puns and wordplay, such as exploring the literal meanings of idioms. Now, Jeff, you said you wanted to introduce some stuff about the book.
Okay, so here's the background for this. Aside from the fact that this book is one of a very small number that I love so much I can recite the first line from memory at the drop of a hat. But in a foreword that he wrote, I think for the 40th, maybe 50th anniversary edition, Norton Juster described that sometime in the 1950s, as he was just starting his career as an architect in New York City, that he ended up getting a grant to write a children's book about architecture and urban planning. And along the way, there was a lot of pacing that was kind of going on back and forth. And after a conversation he'd had with a little boy waiting at a train station, where they essentially started talking about infinity as what's the largest number you can imagine? Now add one. Now add one to that. And on and on and on. He ended up sort of writing a little bit of this and sending it to somebody as a way on the book about architecture and urban planning, which, by the way, he never finished. The beginnings of the illustrations happened because in the downstairs half of the flat was a young artist whose career was just beginning named Jules Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer later became very famous for cartoons that he would draw for the New Yorker magazine. And Pfeiffer could hear Norton Juster pacing back and forth on the top floor and kind of at one point sort of walked up, wanted to find out what all this racket was coming about from. And as they talked, Pfeiffer just started to draw things. And in many ways, as Juster wrote, they fed off of each other, with Juster trying to write things and describe things that would be impossible for Pfeiffer to draw, and Pfeiffer answering the challenge, sort of upping their game continuously. The book was published in 1961, and although it took a little while for it to gain some momentum, it has remained in print continuously ever since. It's been adapted into a movie, and if I start singing, it's going to be stuff from the movie. It's been adapted into a children's opera, it's been adapted into a musical, and right now there is a remake of the film stuck in Hollywood very lovingly calls Development Hell. For the record, it's also one of my 3 favorite standalone fantasy novels ever. The other 2 are Neil Gaiman's Stardust and Roger Zelazny's A Night in the Lonesome October. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is easily another one of the top 5, and what occupies the last slot kind of rotates depending on how I'm feeling on any given day. But for something that has literally been in print for 50 years, no, 60 at this point, it's been in print continuously for 60 years. If that doesn't define a classic, I'm not sure I know what does.
Oh,
Yeah, great. That's a lot of stuff that I did not know about this book. Like 100% of that I didn't know. So that's good. I'm learning stuff every day.
Stop learning, start dying.
So, what was your overall impression of the book then, Jeff, when you read it the first time? And when did you read it the first time?
Okay, the very, very first time that I picked it up, I was 8. And at least as I'm remembering it, it was a day that, kind of like Seuss opens with the Cat in the Hat, the sun would not shine, it was too wet to play. And I couldn't really get into any of the other things that I happened to have sitting around my room. This was actually on one of the bookshelves down in the living room. And I didn't finish it that first time because I got to the first drawing of the Humbug, and it scared the bejesus out of me. And
You could be a children's monster.
yeah, but that drawing of the Humbug is pretty scary if you just happen to flip to it out of the blue. It was a couple years later that I went through and did read it all the way through for the first time. And ever since then, I have gone back and I have reread it not less than every 10 years, kind of somewhere on the order of every 5 to 10 years. I am now in my mid-40s. I still find new pieces of wordplay. It was the first longer chapter book that I read out loud with either of my kids. I have seen that film adaptation, which is sort of like The Wizard of Oz in that it goes from live action to animation to live action at the end, kind of like the black and white color, black and white bracketing. And the animation was directed by Chuck Jones of Looney Tunes and the good version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas fame. No, I'm not opinionated on that topic at all. I mean, if you add it up, I have probably read this book in excess of a dozen times. I've seen the film at least half of that. And there aren't many films I can think of that I've seen more than 5. The kind of wordplay that features throughout this whole thing, it is kind of central to my sense of humor.
That's great. So you loved it. Favorite book of all time, I'm hearing still, like you said earlier. So
At least one of the top 3 that's not part of a series.
that's fine. Yeah. All right, Kyptan. What about you? When did you first read this book? Do you remember? And did you like it? Did you hate it?
Okay, so I first read this book in 7th grade English class. It was an excerpt, and I think it covered the beginning of the book up through the doldrums. And I was a very boring English teacher, and I used to just randomly pick up crates of magazines that were stored in the shelving next to my seat, and I would just read through those during class. She kind of hated that, but also she wasn't doing anything else worth my time. So so that was my first experience, but I had no idea where to pick up the rest of it, and I never went further until this day.
Oh wow. Wow. So you finished the book for the first time on this read.
Correct.
Wow.
Yep. Today.
Today.
The day we are recording.
Cutting it close there, right here. I see. Okay.
I've had so much to do this weekend, but yes.
No. Hey, life is crazy sometimes. So that's good. And
It's not like I've had weeks of prep. Just kidding.
no, we gave this assignment to you yesterday. So
Oh, thank
now,
you.
did you like it or did you hate it? Be prepared. Jeff will stab you through the computer if you hate it.
No. Jeff will stab me if I say the wrong thing. But I
No,
will
I
say
won't.
that I thought it was a very good book. I did not particularly enjoy listening or reading all of it. And yes, this is one that I did partly on audiobook because I was late and driving for like 8 hours this weekend. But I thought that it's very clear that this could have been a much more blithe book, something maybe along the lines of like Amelia Bedelia. Which I love. I love Amelia Bedelia, but that's definitely a book for children. And it only plays with words in one particular way, though it finds many ways to do so. But this one cuts at more philosophical concepts, and
Yeah.
I think for a child, it's advanced reading material disguised as fun reading material.
Absolutely.
I'd
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. All right, Panda, you're up. When
Okay.
did you read it? Did you like it?
So I remember I had bought this book from a Scholastic book order. Remember those?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so that would have been elementary school for me, and I honestly don't really remember what my expectations were. I think I was like 8 or 9 at the time, and I just remember I really liked the cover. It was very blue, and the dog with the clock for a body. I was very drawn to it.
Mhm.
I got it, I read it. I don't think I really understood it when I read it the first time, but then I came across the film adaptation one day at the library, and I watched it and I was like, "Oh, this is really fun." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, I have this book." So I went back and reread it and then I enjoyed it a lot more. So, mostly because I could better understand what was going on and the wordplay that was going on my reread.
Cool. Let's see.
What
For
about
me.
you?
Oh, for me? Yes. Well, I don't remember when I first picked it up because I have a really bad memory of when I picked up what book. Needless to say, it was probably when I was young. But if you can imagine a like 5th grade to like 11th grade Cesky. He was like the perfect epitome of Milo. Minus, I loved books, and Milo didn't. But in the beginning, he talks about, he would hurry to where he was supposed to go to sit there and wait for the thing he was supposed to do, and then he'd hurry to the next thing, and that's like that was me. I would just go from one class to the next and just be ready and blah blah blah. But I do remember that I had no expectations. I'd never heard of the book when I read it, but I loved it when I read it because I saw myself in Milo so much. And while I think I missed most of the wordplay and the tricks, I think I caught just enough to really get me excited. And then especially the end where he looks at his bookshelf, which is kind of a spoiler, sorry, and he sees that all these books are like another world, another place to go. And that really struck home with me. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's part of what has always drawn me towards reading more. Like it pushed me like, this is like what reading could be. And, I loved it. So, and then reading it again this time, it was so much better. I saw so many new things and so many new word things that I was like, oh my gosh, that's another word thing that I missed the first time. Like, of course it is. And like, there's another one and another one and another one. Yeah. So no, it was great. I loved it. So let's see on a list of questions. Was the writing style good? I mean, it was good, I would think, but was there anything you particularly disliked about it or really liked about it, you guys? Anything that really stuck out? Too much wordplay, too many idioms going around, not enough? What do you guys think?
Too much for me, but I'm weird.
All right, too much for the weird guy. We heard it first. Jeff, what do you have to say?
Well, what I was starting to say is it's actually a thing where the author always worried about how well it would translate because of how much of it does play with English idioms and turns of phrase.
Yeah.
And
and
every
did it
time
translate?
It's been, I think the count is about 20 languages. So presumably it did.
I
but
think it would translate well into French because French has a lot of maxims as well, and they could just like substitute with the French ones.
That's an interesting, thought that since they're all English, mainly English translation or sayings, how closely you can translate them to other languages and keep the same meaning without having to rewrite the whole book around your idioms.
And it's not just the idioms; it's also like the assonants and the consonants. Like
Yes.
the words are all placed very carefully in connection to each other, and every part of the word.
I agree. It's very rhythmic, and like Juster was very intentional about how the words sounded, and something that I found when I was prepping for this episode was he originally was going to call Digitopolis Numeropolis, but Numeropolis just doesn't sound the same. Like it doesn't sound as good as Digitopolis, which is very boom, boom, boom.
And you also miss out then with both the alliteration and the rhythmic similarity to Dictionopolis.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dialogue in this book. Like it's majority, I think, is dialogue, and the dialogue is also very rhythmic. I did listen to this partly on audio, and I really enjoyed the narrator. There's actually two versions. I listened to the older one, and I do recommend that if people do listen to the audiobook to follow along in either the physical or the ebook copy because of the illustrations, although apparently it terrifies little kids sometimes.
You can terrify small children.
Yeah, the humbug is bad. Let's rephrase that. The humbug can be very scary, and the 2-page spread that is some of the Demons of Ignorance can be particularly scary. Actually, the other one that freaked the snot out of me was the drawing of Dr. Discord.
Okay, I could see that.
When I was little, and I mean little as in 7th grade, I actually thought that Talk looked a little mean and surly and didn't look friendly. I was disinclined to pick up the book further after that.
He is a watchdog.
He is a watchdog.
Mm-hmm.
A literal watchdog. I still love that.
Okay, well, let's see. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add before we moved into our spoiler section?
I'm going to add one real quick piece, and
Mhm.
it's that there is a thing I think this book has in common with Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, because I actually was trying to spend some time trying to find the exact quote, but she had some trouble getting A Wrinkle in Time published at first because a lot of people thought it was too difficult for children, and her response was first, if it's not good enough for adults, it's not good enough for children, which is the part I think is relevant here, but also that she said, no, Wrinkle's just too difficult for adults.
Who are
And
set in their ways.
and Kip's remark about how this was advanced reading material disguised as fun reading material was kind of what triggered that thought with me.
Yeah, I do have to agree. I think that if you really wanted to spend the time and the effort, which could very well be worth it easily, you can definitely pick this book apart and read it as an advanced, guide to wordplay almost. And just because it's so detailed and
Oh, yeah.
depthful there. Like for sure. Like just like you're saying, Kip, it's an advanced book, but it's disguised in this whimsy and this fun that even small children can read it without like being overwhelmed by new words or new things like that. So
Like this book could be could have a whole series of annotations, or like how sometimes they do a smaller work within like a giant work, and oh my god, Panda
There's an
is showing me
annotated
an
copy.
annotated copy.
I would say there is an annotated edition of this.
But I think it could be even more extreme than that. I think you could build a textbook around this book and just use it for examples.
You could, yeah.
You could
Yeah.
build like a style guide for graduate level English courses and use only this book as quotes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's true. All right, let's move into our spoiler section of the episode. So, if you haven't read the Phantom Tollbooth, shame on you. First off, you should go read it right now and come back. It's a quick read. I mean,
Even the audiobook is only 4 hours.
yeah, 4 hours. It's a great book. You'll enjoy it. And then come back and listen to the rest of it with us. So let's move in. Let's see. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the story a little bit more in detail, or do you want to just go straight to questions?
Does anyone have any like particular story bits they want to talk about, or?
Well, some of it is that I was figuring we covered the story itself reasonably thoroughly a minute ago. So
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
But if we're going to talk about it, Cesky, you've got sort of a note in here that, yeah, in some ways this is maybe less than a single story, almost more like a bunch of short stories or vignettes that just happen to have the single through line of Milo and his trip first into the toll booth and ultimately to the castle in the air. And
back again.
And back through the toll booth again.
Yeah.
It's not unfair to say some of those vignettes are stronger than others.
No, I did. I put that in because as I was thinking about kind of questions and things, I was realizing that each chapter was kind of like, here's your chapter here, and here's your chapter here. And it really felt like not segmented in a bad way, but here's your section about numbers. Here's your section about words. Here's your section about sound and the meaning of sound. Here's your section about ignorance. And I really liked that. I thought that was a great strength to the book, that it was a little bit more segmented, but still easily read throughable. And you could almost pull out a section and read it and then just go back. So
It is an adventure story. The surface level, it's Milo's adventure through the kingdom of wisdom, and he's going from one place to another and gaining something from each of those places. And it's reminiscent of, things like Voyage of the Dawn Treader or My Father's Dragon, where there's the characters that are going through on not exactly a quest, but I mean, in this case, kind of a quest. He kind of picks up a quest as he goes.
Yeah, he doesn't start with it,
yeah.
but he definitely acquires it. And
Mhm.
and some of those gifts are very profound, and some of those gifts or tools he picks up are a little less so. But absolutely one of my favorites is what King Azaz says to him as he hands over the box. In this box are all the words I know. With them, you can answer all the questions that have never been asked and ask all the questions that have never been answered. Use them well and wisely. So, if that doesn't make it clear that in spite of a very STEMmy background and some facility with numbers, I'm a words person.
yeah. Hey, no worries. That's good. So
Yeah, that was one of my questions is, are you a words person or a numbers person? Because I'm also more of a words person. I like the sound of words a lot more than I do numbers. Like once you get past, algebra, when you get into like geometry and calc, I'm just like, no, it's not for me. I like stats though.
I'm not really a numbers person, but I am a logic person, and I'm not entirely clear where that falls in this paradigm.
that falls in a different toll booth somewhere else.
I mean, do you ask that because typically people would associate numbers with logic and
Normally they
not so
would,
much
but I
words?
mean, grammar has its own syntax and rules.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't really express logic with numbers alone, I don't think.
No, witness the mathematician's letter.
Hey,
Yeah,
hey, that was read to me, and I had no chance to try and pull out pen and paper or Google to try and decipher it. But does it decode to anything?
it does.
Apparently, the answer is no.
It's not? I thought it was the different letters.
No, I think there have been
It's
some
like a
places where people
cipher.
have. My vague understanding is that with them, or is that there have been some people who have tried, but that in fact, no, it does not decode to
Mm.
anything.
Oh, that's a
Okay,
bummer.
It
that's
is to me
sad.
too. I agree.
But there was the part in Digitopolis where, and also with the dodecahedron, where they were saying a bunch of numbers, but it doesn't make sense. Or like the 2.3 children, where then there's this
Oh, I love
child
that
who is
one.
0.3, right? Like
0.58.
numbers, or
0.58.
0.58. Numbers like by itself, you look at it and it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, but in reality, it's like you don't have 0.58 of a child.
Which is a fun point to make. I liked that point. I liked that
Yeah.
the statistical average of the nuclear family was
And a few
was an impossibility.
and a few years ago I was only 0.43 and it was so much more inconvenient.
Yeah.
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 Right.
All right. Here's a good question for you guys. I think Panda added this one. What did you guys think of the doldrums? Have you ever been in the doldrums yourself? And what's the best way for you to get out of them?
Don't say there's nothing to do in the doldrums. I'm ready to diddle away the day, yes I am. I warned you.
There he is, breaking into song for us. So,
There's one other spot where there might be, but
huh? So if you find yourself in the doldrums, Jeff, how do you get yourself out? How do you spark that motivation and determination?
for me, honestly, sometimes it's just hard. And at least from the most recent round of time I can remember having been through it, it was just time and just letting it wash out.
Like the doldrums is clearly an analog for depression and apathy, but
Mhm.
if we don't take it to the extreme, I find that one thing that actually can get me out of like a minor depressive episode is and this did not work so well in the time of COVID because for reasons that will become clear, I like to go to the supermarket.
Mm.
I,
Yeah, that does
I like
become
to
tough.
go to the supermarket and I like to plan out something to bake. And I like to get all the
Mhm.
ingredients and go through the rows, buy it, and then set up in the kitchen, make way too many dirty dishes, and come out with something delicious and sugary at the end of it.
That's
Yeah,
great.
And
totally understandable.
it's I haven't made cookies in the shape of letters or numbers in a while, but totally
Mm.
have.
There's always a time to start, Kyptan. You can always come back to your roots there.
Sure,
Oh, that would
sure.
be great.
I've got a fresh bag of ice and malt sugar that would be great in some decorations.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Okay, if you do it, you definitely have to post pictures in Discord.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Um,
Panda, do you want to answer that? What's
Yeah. So I really like the imagery of the doldrums. I like how Juster gave it a form and a name. And it's to me it's that state of mind when you're feeling like lazy or just want to do nothing. And I felt after college that I was definitely in there. I was so burnt out. And so it was just like going to work, coming home, and then just sitting in front of the TV and just binging for hours and then repeat. And
And the way it's
how
captured
I
in the movie
got
is
out of
brilliant.
yeah. But my personality is I like being busy and productive. I don't like wasting time, but sometimes I just go too long without taking breaks and rests and I get burnt out. So I remind myself to pause and rest, but find more productive ways to rest, like, walking around my neighborhood, doing something crafty, doing some exercises, write in my journal, talking to you, lovely people on Discord.
Oh,
Read
love
Malazan.
and awe there.
Yeah, sure.
think
Read
that's what-
read some
That's
dense
what
Malazan.
pushes
epic
her
fantasy.
into the. That's what pushes her into the doldrums there.
I will admit, reading House of Chains, it almost put me in a reading slump.
Oh,
Yeah.
we need more
But
Murderbot.
I know. But revisiting the Phantom Tollbooth really helped. So
Good. I found that for myself, the thing that helps me best is routine and like organization. Just keep doing the things that you're supposed to do every day. Wake up early, eat breakfast, take a shower. Just like especially those are the ones like take a shower. Those help keep me grounded. I feel more productive or more able to do those things. And then if I do one or two, then I can keep going. And so having that start of a routine or just doing the things I know I should do, but I don't feel like doing, sometimes helps kickstart me into doing the things I want to do for fun that I actually, wouldn't do. So
yeah, start off with the easy things. Get a few things checked off,
Mhm.
and then ride that momentum.
Yeah, that's right. All right, while we're talking about the doldrums, what is your favorite area in the land of wisdom where you can learn all things? The doldrums, the island of conclusions, the forest of sight, the valley of sound, Dictionopolis, Digitopolis, the numbers mine, the mountain of ignorance, or the castle in the air. Panda, what's your favorite?
I actually really, really enjoyed Expectations, which is one of the ones that you
Expectations.
didn't name.
Okay,
My. Welcome to the land of expectations.
I could not name all of them. I'm sorry.
It's your introduction to the whole kingdom of wisdom, right? And when I read it the first time, I just was not expecting that tone. And it's just such a fun, quirky experience. And it's the weatherman, but not, predicting the forecast.
No.
And that just really set off the tone for the rest of the journey.
And the entire time that Cesky was asking people about their expectations, I was having to bite my tongue to keep saying that expectations is the place you have to go before you get where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Forest of Sight, for sure.
Forest of Sight.
Yeah.
That's the scene that has the scene with the perspective man, correct?
Yep, Alec
I'm the
Biggins,
fattest,
who sees
skinniest
things.
man. I'm the skinniest fat man. Yeah.
That's the giant, but I really didn't care for him at all.
Oh,
No.
that's fine.
Yeah, I
No.
cared for Alec Bings.
Yes. Bings, yeah.
Who could see the other side of things.
Yep.
And he grows down.
And he grows
Yes.
down like all the rest of the people in his family. And all of his family members had different ways of seeing things. Like his sister could see underneath things, but what she can't see, she overlooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, see through things, but not. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And like one of his family members saw something about like the answer to every question or things like that, and I was like, okay, this is the knowledge zone. and a lot of these abilities seems like they would open up whole new realms of epistemology
Within the Forest
if
of
you could build them
Sight.
into devices.
Yeah. Within the Forest of Sight, my personal favorite chunk is Chroma the Great and the Lost Week.
Oh yes, that was a fun one. If you were awake at that Tuesday at 5:37 a.m., you had a very interesting experience. Yeah.
Very interesting 14 minutes, during which an entire week went by. But separately from Chroma, my favorite section is the word market.
Mm.
And in fact, from Officer Shrift in his capacity as judge, my response when people ask me about how I am is almost always, I am. Would you like a long sentence or a short one?
The shortest sentence I know.
And I have tried and tried on and off over the years to see if I can come up with a complete sentence that is shorter. And I cannot come up with something that you could diagram as a complete sentence that does not have an implied subject or verb that is shorter than I am, which is all of 3 letters.
That's good.
Which is why Latin was nice, because you could do that with like one word, right?
But even there, if you were going to do it with a single word, I'm pretty sure it would have to be more than 3 letters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or at least no shorter than 3 letters.
Good. I think my favorite, or one of my favorites, I love this whole book, if you can't tell. But one of my favorites was the Island of Conclusions, where you can jump to conclusions, but you have to swim out. You have to work and put in the effort, and some people never put in that effort to swim out. And I think from reading as a child, it's I've always wanted to I don't want to jump to a conclusion, because it's a lot harder to get back from your conclusion than it is to get there in the beginning. So I just love that, and it's like,
yeah,
somebody.
No, I agree, but it is one of the pieces I think maybe overstates its welcome just a little tiny bit.
Is it because of Canby?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
I would say it's better than the giant house.
Yes. Kip, I'm with you. I'm with you that section with the giant, the midget, the fat man, the thin man, that is my least favorite chunk of the book.
Hey, same.
Yeah.
It's not in the film, so they did cut that part out.
I mean, it doesn't affect his journey in the slightest.
No, it doesn't really.
The story just stops. It does this repetitive thing 4 times in a row, and then it moves on, having not really done all that much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The giant, the thin man, the short man, the fat man. They give him nothing except a very short little speech, and then we just move on.
Yeah, the point I think of that one is more of just perspective. Like, so many different people can see the same thing in different ways. But
I mean, it has a point, but it's not tied into the narrative flow of the story.
I thinking back, I do agree with you, Kip. It does kind of stall for a little bit there. Not that there's not anything good you can learn from it, because there is, but it does. The story does kind of stop.
Yeah.
Take a little bit of a backseat while we learn something, and then move on. Where the rest of the lessons are more ingrained inside the story and the passage of accomplishment, you could say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's always a flimsy tie-in to the. Sorry, there's always a tie-in to the journey. Some of the tie-ins are flimsier than others. This is the flimsiest.
Yeah.
But back to the Sea of Knowledge, I really like the part at the end where the humbug, he comes out of the Sea of Knowledge dry, and the others, they actually were wet, and he's like, oh, I can't wait to go back to the Island of Conclusion. They're like, yeah, okay, you did not learn your lesson.
I'll say one thing that I was reading and I did not like. This was the only thing I really didn't like was near the end when they've rescued the prince and the princesses, excuse me, and they're trying to get away, and they're like, well, time flies, and so now the dog can fly. And I just was like, no, I don't like that. I mean, it makes sense and it's funny and it's hilarious, kind of, but not to me right at this moment. So that was the only.
That was too easy.
Yeah, it was too easy almost. So I don't know if you guys like that part or not, but not me.
I think it fit in with the overall whimsical tone of the book perfectly. So at that point, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't mind it.
Also, he glided. He didn't fully fly. He glided.
Yes, I'll let it slide. I don't have it. I don't have the exact section pulled up right now, but
I do know that the word glided was used, and that's all I'm hanging this hat on right now.
All right. Let's move on. We're gonna do one more kind of silly question, fun one, and then we'll talk about it being a classic again. And I think that'll cover everything except for final parts, unless you guys want to introduce something else. So, out of all the demons in the Mountains of Ignorance, which one was your favorite? Which one was closest to your fallibilities? And lest you've forgotten all the demons there are, I have a list right here. So we have the Census Taker. That was, the Triple Demons of Compromise, the Horrible Hopping Hindsight, the Gorgons of Hate and Malice, the Overbearing Know-It-All, Gross Exaggeration, Threadbare Excuse, and the Ugly Dilemma.
But also from
I think
beforehand,
that's
we have
all
the
of them.
terrible. Well, they're sort of the last ones to catch up, because prior to them, we have Milo Talking the Humbug getting by the Terrible Trivium, the Demon of Insincerity, the
Thank
Gelatinous
you.
Giant, and the Ever-Present Word Snatcher.
Yes. Yes, I did. I only got the last few. Thank you for fixing that for me. So, which one's your favorite, Jeff? Or which one are you the closest to?
I hate admitting it, but it's the Terrible Trivium. Again, wonderfully illustrated in the movie, very dapper Victorian gentleman who just happens to be completely lacking a face. But all the little bits of putter, putter, putter,
Yeah.
putter, putter before you get going. That is the one that plays right to my own weaknesses.
All
I
right.
think that one may also be mine. I do tend to fuss about the little things that don't really matter.
I mean, I absolutely do that, but
No, Kyptan, no. You would never nitpick anything. No, no, say it ain't so.
what wasn't there an insufferable know-it-all?
There is the
Yes.
overbearing know-it-all, and that's also
Yes,
my
the
vote.
overbearing know-it-all. Huh?
There we go. That's me.
What about you,
all right.
Cesky?
I have two answers for this. My favorite, I think, is the Census Taker.
That
Just
was
kind
fun.
of, it was fun. It was, they think it's the census taker, counting people, and they're doing all their paperwork, and the more they do, the more they lose.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of getting caught up in things and like losing yourself because you're so focused on things. So that's my favorite, right? The Census Taker. Probably the one I don't think it's the one I most resonate with, but I think it's the one people would think I might resonate with is the insincerity one, because I'm a very
Aw.
positive. Well, I'm just a very positive person, like overly positive sometimes, and sometimes people can take that as, oh, you're just so happy all the time, you just don't care, or you're just being, like fake happy almost. And I don't think a lot of people think that of me, but that's something I don't want people to think about me, because I am truly happy and I do truly care, and so that's
I
the one
can
I would be
attest.
like,
Chesky is a sincerely happy person. If you need a smile, find Chesky.
oh, well, thank you for that. I try, but I'm just a sincerely happy person, but sometimes it can be taken for insincerity because of how common it is, or often I am. So let's see. Was there
I
anything
was
else?
texting
Oh.
with a new friend once, and he thought that I was absolutely faking positivity because I put too many smileys and emojis in like
Oh.
the ends of sentences.
Now that is something I cannot see you doing, is actually using emojis and a lot of them at once. Just doesn't
No,
strike me as you.
not like actual emojis, like emoticons before emojis.
Mm.
So
Oh,
just
okay.
the colon and parentheses and uppercase or lowercase p. Yeah,
Okay. Fake emojis or old school
fake
emojis.
emojis, old school emojis. He thought I
Yeah.
used too many of them and was not that positive. And then started spending more time with me. He was like, no, wait, you actually smile that much. Okay.
Yeah. Great. All right. Let's see. The Phantom Tollbooth can definitely be considered a modern classic. What qualities kind of determine a classic, and which of these qualities do we see in this book? For me, I think one of the qualities is that you can read this at any age and get anything you want to put into it. You can get back out of it. If you put in even just a little bit of work, you can get so much out of it. And I think that's part of it, of what determines a classic. And I think you can definitely see that here. So,
I agree.
Classic is timeless. Like
and you
you
feel
have.
the book is timeless, Kyptan?
Oh, this book is timeless.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's what you thought. So,
Yep.
Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, that in addition to the sort of criteria that you were laying out there, the thing I would say out of it is that a classic should be something where if you read it at different ages, you will get different things out of it. And this book, I think, has that in spades. I mean, I kind of acknowledged in my opening gushing homage that every time I have read this book, I find some new bit of wordplay or pun that either I didn't get before or that strikes me differently than it has earlier. And even from the stretch where I was listening to, in this case, the Rainn Wilson narrated version one day earlier this week, just because I wanted to be sure everything in the book was fresh in my mind before we came in to record tonight. As the mathemagician is taking them out of the numbers mine and getting ready to leave Digitopolis so that they are on their way out to the foothills of confusion and the mountains of ignorance, that there's the reference to how he did it by carrying the 3. And every other time I've read this, I took it as just the strict mathematical reference to carrying in addition. And this time around, I was like, oh, yeah, he picked them up and carried them.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
I thought he did both at once.
Yes,
Yeah.
he did. But just
Yeah.
this is the first time that both of those meanings actually registered with me.
Mm.
The last time I read it, it was the part about synonym buns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really was that a couple of days later I was having a cinnamon roll at breakfast, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, particularly because of how often little kids mispronounce cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I think that's a good point, which is this book really captures like the child wonder and curiosity. And I think he does a really good job of portraying that perspective. From the conversations that Milo has with the different characters to, he even put in the what is the biggest number? Just add 1 and add 1, right? Like from an actual child who asked him that. It makes me so happy. It makes me, when I revisit this book, revisit the story, it just feels like I am a kid again and helps me to pause and just smell the roses, enjoy the quirks that there are in our lives and society, and not take things for granted.
Another thing that I would say that defines a classic is that the knowledge of the book itself, and let's say when you finish the book and you go back and you reread it, it hasn't been spoiled.
Mm.
There's no like concept of spoilers in a classic. Not enduring, lasting, meaningful ones anyways.
I think there's definitely like I want people to experience this for themselves that first time. But then
Sure.
afterwards, when you go back to revisit it, it's not, the enjoyment isn't lessened because you already know what happens in the story. I think that's maybe what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that too. Once you've read it, it doesn't ruin future rereads.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
As Jeff has made clear.
Abundantly.
Yeah. No worries. I was
And
going to say another one. Oh, sorry. What did you want to say?
I'll just sort of building off of it from a strictly commercial standpoint, I would say that if something remains in print long enough that not only could somebody have purchased a copy new when it came out, but that they could subsequently purchase a copy new for their children or their grandchildren, that would be a pretty good mark of defining something as a classic.
It's a very practical way of defining one.
I acknowledged up front, from a commercial standpoint, it's true, but I think I'm literally on my 4th copy of this book.
Yeah, I think that's a valid quality to determine a classic. And I think one of the things that could help determine a classic is that the book inspires you to something, or can inspire you to something. Like for me, this book inspired me to read more, to visit more kingdoms than the Kingdom of Wisdom, to read the next book and see what the next adventure would be. And so I think that can be a quality of a classic, is that it inspires you to do something. In this case, to read more or to think about things more or something. I don't know, but it's there. So
it itself also drew from several classics like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, Gulliver's Travels. Like it was really fun seeing those different elements interwoven into this new story.
Yes.
All right. Are there any final thoughts that you guys want to say before we close out this great episode?
If you have not read this book yet, go do it before you turn 99. Read it out loud. if there is a kid in your life who is still willing to sit and let you read to them and has the attention span for a sustained story, read this book out loud with that child.
All right.
I
Panda, what
loved
were
how
you gonna
square
say?
meals tasted horrible.
That's a great final thought, Kyptan. I love it. Thank you. Panda, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did want to touch on like similar recommendations. Like,
Oh,
so if
yeah.
you like this book, what else would you like? And this is actually like I'm recommending the recommendations to myself because I haven't read these yet, but they seem like something I will like because I like the Phantom Tollbooth. So there is a book called Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, and it has no plot. It's a conversation between Marco Polo and Kublai Khan. And Marco Polo is just like describing all these cities that he's visited, and Kublai Khan is just like not believing, but then they end up having conversations about culture, religion, memory, and general human experience. So that is something that I feel like that's kind of the adult version of this. It wouldn't have, the word plays as much potentially, but there is a quote from that book that is quoted in the annotated version, which is how I found out about the book. And then I was listening to a fictitious podcast episode with an author called Marissa Levian, and she referenced this book. And she said it's one of her favorites, and she also drew inspiration from this book for her own book that just came out called The World Gives Way. So I also want to read that one.
Right.
I do
Good
have
recommend.
one final thought recommendation for a book like The Phantom Tollbooth, but more recent, and it's Haroun and the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie.
Oh, I've never heard of this one.
Salman Rushdie is a fairly famous author, mostly for the satanic verses, and he does absurdism and something that is related to magical realism.
And I also think that, Hitchhiker's Guide, like that has similar. So, go ahead.
One I think is The Girl Who Fell into Fairyland and Led the Rebels There. And I don't remember the third off the top of my head. I just vaguely remember that there is a third.
Yeah.
I did just look up Haroun and the Sea of Stories, and I said it was newer. It came out in 1990, so I guess it is newer, but it's still not particularly new.
It's newer
right.
relative to the Phantom
Well,
Tollbooth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to conclude this episode of the Green Team of the Legendarium. If you want to chat with us about anything we've covered or missed in this episode, you can always check us out on the Legendarium's Discord, and you can find the link on thelegendarium.com. You can follow us, mainly Panda, on Twitter at Green Team Pod for updates and fun times. She's great at it. And of course, check out the Legendarium podcast for Wheel of Time, Cosmere, Lord of the Ring content, and so much more. Thanks to you, our panelists. Jeff, thank you.
You're welcome. I wouldn't have missed this one if I had an option.
Kyptan, thank you as well.
No problem.
Big shout out to Panda, thank you as well.
It was my pleasure.
Great. And of course, I'm Cesky, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Those of you who are only hearing this did not see the evil grin just a minute ago.